Do I have to stay clipped into that thing? She slapped the side of her own helmet in frustration. The spills wouldn't be so bad if I could lift my feet off the pedals. He righted the bike and leaned it against his hip. The problem is you aren't paying enough attention to me. If I lean left, you lean left. If I nudge right, you nudge right. No more or less than the way I do it. You have to be in sync with me with my every move. More, really. You need to anticipate exactly what I'm going to do and do it with me. The better you get at it, the better a tandem team will be. It's not so easy when all I have to look at is your back. He began refitting a fingerless glove, but instead now de-velcroed it entirely and flung it dramatically to the pavement. Plenty of other couples manage it. Don't get so huffy with me. Excuse the pun. I didn't hear one. Think bike manufacturers. He retrieved the glove. We're being silly, he said. Let's get going. This time they were ready for the battle of angles, and after she seated herself and hunkered into position, they gripped tightly to the handlebars, shoulders loose, and while the bike wobbled, shifting left then right, they both doggedly began pedaling. They managed 30 feet straight, and then a ginger turn out of their cul-de-sac. He called back, "Are you pedaling?" "I'm pedaling." "What?" "I'm pedaling." "I'm asking if you're pedaling." "Yes, I'm pedaling. Yes, yes." "It's hard to hear you with the wind up here." He tried twisting around as much as he dared. Didn't want to take his eyes off the road. "But you're pedaling, right?" She wondered how this exactly was going to bring them closer if they couldn't even talk. It was early and cold out and even chillier on the bike, and she wanted to be at home with a cup of chamomile tea, a drink she'd recently discovered since learning from a magazine quiz that caffeine wasn't right for her personality type. "Don't deadweight me," he said. "I just need you to do enough to cover your own mass." "I'm pedaling," she said quietly. "I'm pedaling." She tried to sit still, scanning the back of his event jersey, reading the names of all the sponsors of the Ogle County ride around the courthouse. It wasn't long before her back began to stiffen from the effort not to lean. It wasn't like riding her old Schwinn at all. No feeling of serendipity, just the effort required to be the guts of a machine, going along and getting along. It was possible to get used to it, but why should she? On one of their early dates, they had gone on the paved trails through the northwest suburbs toward an arboretum. He had made sandwiches for them, alfalfa sprouts and American cheese with creamy mayonnaise, which had all sort of melted and become distastefully warm and pale in his saddleback during the ride. But it was sweet, too, and they talked about vacations and how her father's ideal holiday was to pitch a tent in some backwoods and remain stationary, she and her brothers exploring the area until by the end of the week the wilderness was as familiar as their own block in Skokie. His summers were spent in short, frenzied bursts of movement, being ferried from one site to the next, looking at the Grand Canyon only from the North Rim, the sand arches of Wyoming through the windows of a Volare station wagon, the pine needles of the redwood forest as a green blur. We had blisters on our ass by the end, he had laughed, and anxiety dreams. She had laughed too and been under the impression that they were in agreement about her being luckier in terms of childhood. His parents had eventually divorced, although not until he was in his 40s. He reached back and handed her a payday bar, and she felt brave enough to take it and even nibbled a portion from the top. "Can we stop and eat?" she yelled. He took a showy swig from one of his bottles, swirled the cherry-red drink around in his mouth, then tried to spit it through his front teeth like Bodie on The Wire. But it ended up spraying everywhere, partly from the effort of pedaling, but mostly because he didn't have any gaps between his teeth. "No stopping to eat," he said, brushing the splatter off his shirt. "Gotta learn to do it all on the bike." "But I have trouble chewing when I'm gasping for air. Plus those energy snacks are so dry, I need lots of water. It even says on the package to drink a bottle of water with each Bohydrate bar." "It's a challenge," she agreed. "Are you pedaling as hard as you can?" The going was slower than he expected, but he had to admit they were indeed riding in tandem. Farmhouses floated pleasantly in the distance, the scenic vistas of farmland in decay, but as they pedaled on, they reached areas where the corn was fuller and larger. The crops changed to low, scrubby soybeans, crowning golden in the late afternoon, and beyond that the land emptied, and they pedaled along gray guardrails. "Pound it out," he said supportively. The air was heavy with cow shit and motor fumes. "Go to your happy place. It's going to start getting challenging soon." She thought about food, real food. After a day spent working over a carb bar like docile ruminant, she was thinking of pot roast. A pot roast like her mother made. Hadn't seen food like that in years and years. God, if she could get another crack at her mother's pot roast, she would eat whatever portion her mother put out for her. She wouldn't knife away the fat, wouldn't even purge later. "They call this the magic hour," he said over his shoulder, "when the directors like to shoot scenes for movies. Pretty, ain't it? The light just now?" "Fork tender," she called up. His bike helmet nodded, bobbed approvingly. "I guess that captures something of the spirit." "Bastante," she called. "Maybe we can just pause for a bit, have dinner in a restaurant?" "We never agreed on a stopping signal, did we?" he said. They pedaled nearly blind into the ink, but when cars approached, she could see the reflected road ribboning out in front of her. Occasionally, the weight of the bike felt like he was carrying it all, and he assumed that she was taking little breaks, and that was fine. He resisted the urge to call back, check in on her, because he knew he had to trust that she would still be there. And then at times his patience was rewarded as he could feel her stirring and pedaling hard for a while before tapering off again. The sun went down. And then when the sun rose again, the next morning, the rain stopped and vapor came up off their limbs. Their bike helmets gave off steam like smokestacks. "Maybe we can take a little breather this morning," she said hopefully. "See some scenery, take a picture, use a bathroom, give our legs a little break, hon?" He wiggled his fingers to keep the blood flowing. "In a little bit," he said, "maybe later. Let's keep going for now." She became adept at rolling down her removable sleeves when it got cold and then unzippering them once it began to warm up. She pulled down her leggings and hastily slapped sunscreen against the accessible areas of her skin when the rotation of the pedal allowed her to reach. Now that they were in more mountainous terrain, when the sun disappeared again behind a cloud or they found themselves in a particularly deep valley and it got cold again, she recovered her skin with the leggings, only in an hour or so to find herself too warm and needing to remove her leggings and reapply the sunscreen. She used lip balm on her face, and during one slightly dangerous moment, even came up off her seat and smeared mentholated cream on as much of her bottom as she dared. "We're very near now," he said. "We'll be at Monarch Pass very soon. Epiphany, anyone?" After just a few miles straight up, the switchbacks began, the tandem stoically taking each directional flip. After the first few, we would turn back and flash a victorious grin, but as they came with more frequency, the tandem got slower, and the nose of the bike seemed several hands higher than the back. At first she gamely nodded, and when he turned, but each turn seemed to cause more effort, until finally, after one brutal flip, he turned around to find the silver carbon frame of the bike stretched back like a demented trombone, her end of the tandem still making its way around the previous curve. He called back words of encouragement, hoping they would reach her, but he couldn't slow down now, no matter how stretched out and out of shape became the tandem. Sometimes he could feel the effort of her pumping, and she would catch up and be right behind again. They made a game of it. With a burst of energy, she would get alongside until it seemed like the stoker might pass the captain. In this way, they barely noticed the hardest part of the climb, when the air thinned and became frigid, and no matter how hard they pedaled, it seemed like the mountain would not come any closer. "Use your oxygen wisely," he said as they reached the summit. Just as he described, the painfully grand open space, and their heads pounding from the strain of just being there. They slowed, listening to the thin air and the packed snow crunching softly under their wheels. She could hear her pulse throbbing inside her bike helmet. "This is it," he said, "the summit, where water changes direction. And now, are you ready to have the epiphany?" "I need a break," she said. He shook his head. "I promise we'll take a break over the edge in Garfield, or Poncha Springs, or Salida, or Kansas. Here we go, honey. Are you ready?" He leaned into the final press until the earth tipped below and the tandem finally began moving all of its own momentum. But the descent was terrifying, and his heart pounded, and he wondered why he had bothered to take them on this journey in the first place. Think of all that could go wrong on a bike. He feathered the brakes, feathered hard. Just a little bit lighter, he thought. If she could just be lighter. Then suddenly, the familiar release of the fears, just as he remembered it. Like a veil being lifted, he had said to himself last time, and he had been right. That's exactly what it felt like. And now the feeling of freedom. They were really moving quickly, and now came that broomsticky feeling. He hoped she remembered his apt observation. They took a few turns, and the bike was moving even faster, and there it was, the epiphany, as clear as the signs for the runaway truck turnoffs. To savor each moment as it comes, let go of yesterday's grudges and hurts. He wasn't mad anymore. The epiphany again, this time for real. She would surely be feeling it too, and though it was risky, he wanted to see her expression, share just a second of the epiphany with her. So he swiveled just slightly, took a quick look. The stoker seat was empty. He was alone on the tandem, just he and only he, something so obvious it felt more like confirmation than revelation. Tears in the corner of his eyes now, and he forced himself to not weep, not at this speed. Lowering his head into the wind, he rode the tandem down Monarch Pass, all by himself. Thanks. Thanks for listening.
That actually, I think, is going to help you write this first.